So over the weekend, more interviews with Naoki Hamaguchi popped up where he talks about changing the gameplay experience for Remake Part 3, how the trilogy is still staying faithful to the original game's story, and how they are bringing Rebirth's PC lighting improvements to the PS5. So, let's talk about it. Alright, so this first interview comes to us from Duncan Heaney of Square Enix, who sat down with Hamaguchi for a Tokyo Game Show refresher of all of the crazy information that hit us in the face last week. And we start off first with Hamaguchi confirms that a lot of the lighting optimization they made to Rebirth on PC will be coming to the PlayStation 5. Hamaguchi says, "We're currently working on bringing the lighting optimizations from the PC version of Rebirth to the PS5 version at the moment and have a good idea of when this can be implemented by. Fans who have played on PS5 can look forward to these further improvements in the future." This is cool. I had speculated in the past that maybe one day they could bring a lot of those PC improvements over to the console side of things, and it was something that Hamaguchi kind of teased earlier in the year in a Famitsu interview when they were promoting Rebirth on PC. So even though there's no firm date on when this update will hit, it is nice to know that they refined the lighting on PC, and it does look better. It may not be like a night and day kind of difference, pun intended, but there is a clear noticeable difference with how the lighting looks on PC. But the fact that they found a way to take that and make it work, hopefully, on PS5, I think is wonderful. The lighting, again, has been a bit of a point of criticism for me personally. Indoors looks great. Everything at night looks stunning. It's just during the day outside, things look a little washed out, a little too bright. So the fact that they're consistently trying to improve on that, specifically the lighting, like he's really hammered home how they're changing the lighting on the Switch 2 and Xbox versions of this game. So that's really exciting. But it also gives me hope that Part 3, again, will also have those same improvements. So a lot of the lighting optimization, maybe even texture work, will hopefully be improved with Part 3. Up next, we move over to the website N-Tower, who also got to speak to Hamaguchi, where he talks about changing the gameplay experience of Part 3. However, our transcripts are coming from the Shinra Archaeology Department on Twitter. Hamaguchi says, moving forward to Part 3, he doesn't want to deliver exactly the same style of gameplay experience as Rebirth again. They're going to evolve and change it to give another different and fresh take on 7's gameplay. It will be revealed in the not too distant future. And a little deeper in that interview, Hamaguchi just kind of explains their thought process of this trilogy. Remake, super linear, refined to Midgar, and then we get to Rebirth, and that's when things really open up. Not fully, but we're introduced to those aspects of the open world, or open field as he's called it before. And I think Part 3 will be the best of Remake and Rebirth, along with all of the cool stuff they've come up with for Part 3. So it's a natural evolution, so I think we were all kind of expecting Part 3's gameplay to be somewhat different. And I think a lot of that is really just going to be with exploration. Again, probably no Chadley. I think we're going to have that spontaneous, organic exploration that a lot of us have been looking for. But I also think that it may mean that they'll refine the pacing of the game's gameplay. I love Rebirth. I enjoyed the open world aspects and the side quests, but one of the things that I actually really missed about 7 Remake was the linearity, or as I like to call it, the cozy linearity. When a game is more linear, it allows for a more focused pace in regards to the storytelling and the character development. In Rebirth, you didn't really get that as much because you're thrust into the open world, and now you've got a ton of things available. Go and explore, unlock towers, fight enemies. You've always got side quests available to do, which I didn't have any issues with the side quests. I thought those were great, but every time you got to a new area, you kind of knew what you were going to do. Activate a tower, go to the nearest town, look at what side quests were there, do those. It kind of became, again, very checklisty, but it also interrupted the pacing because for some people, they wanted to progress the story, but they also wanted to clean up those side quests before doing so, which kind of threw off their enjoyment, I think, of the story pacing. So for Part 3, because there is so much story stuff that they have to work through before the credits roll, I think there's a good chance that a big chunk of that game will be very, very linear, very reminiscent of Remake, because they have to push that story forward and really make sure that it's focused and honed in. But then I think there will be a point where it becomes more rebirthy, where it's like, okay, you've reached that point in the story and the structure where the game clearly wants you to actually go and explore because they're giving you built-in narrative to do so. OG FF7 was like that, FF8, FF9, you had that linear structure that led you into that really well-designed open world, do what you want kind of thing. So I think that's how part 3 will probably be paced and structured, much like the original FF7 was. Now, as far as the gameplay actually goes, again, I don't really expect towers, and if they're there, I would not expect them to work the way that they do in Rebirth. Again, this is stuff I've been saying ad nauseum, the map. We'll be able to fill out that map ourselves. But when we come to combat, I don't expect combat to be turned on its head. I think it's still going to be the way it was in Rebirth, but again, we're really expecting a lot more team-based stuff. So maybe tri-techs, new limit breaks, team synergy limit breaks. You could even do stuff with like synergy backline commands where in Rebirth, if 2 of your characters in your party went down and you only had 1, you could do a synergy attack with someone outside of the party. Imagine if they took that and now you've got 3 characters in the backline and you could do a synergy tri-tech attack with them. So they could temporarily jump in, do that big attack, and then jump back out. So there's a lot of possibilities there. But again, the whole point is to grow and change with each iteration of the game. And for someone like Hamaguchi in CS1, clearly they don't want to do the same thing over again. That's boring. And they also take into consideration fan feedback, which we will get into very shortly. But the whole point is to make sure that part 3 is a new, fun, fresh experience, not to have it feel like Rebirth, but to take all of the best aspects of the 2 previous games and mash them together with the best aspects of part 3. So I'm incredibly excited, man. I cannot wait to see what they've got planned. There's the High Wind 2, which is really probably going to be another massive gameplay change, but the game I feel is truly in really good hands. Now, up next, Hamaguchi talks about fan feedback, how they do incorporate it, but they don't let it drive their core themes of what they're building, which does sound kind of familiar, so if I've covered this in a past video, I apologize if it's repetitive. And this is a really long quote from Hamaguchi, so I'll try my best to kind of summarize some of the bigger points that he's getting at. But essentially, he says that they realize how valuable fan feedback is and how unique their situation is because they're doing a trilogy. So they can make a game, put it out there, let it live and breathe, and then they can see what people are saying and then make changes for their next game, because the whole point is to make sure that their next game is better than the previous game. They wanted Rebirth to outdo Remake, and they want Part 3 to outdo Rebirth. However, they don't let that drive the core of what they're doing, i.e. the story, the narrative. That creative vision and any changes that are made will always be within the internal team. So Kitase, Nomura, Hamaguchi, Nozuma, Kazushige Nojima, that will always be guarded pretty closely. But in terms of incorporating that fan feedback, they tend to save it for some of these smaller, nittier, grittier things. And the example that he gives are minigames. So Rebirth, for example, there may have been a minigame that a lot of people really liked. Great. Awesome. There may have been a minigame that people didn't like and felt should have been done differently, or maybe thought was just way too difficult. So they can adjust that for the next game, which I believe Hamaguchi has already said they will do with Part 3. I believe it was an interview we did with VG247 where he's like, yeah, we kind of went a little overboard on the difficulty on some of the mini games and the achievements and trophies that we had in Rebirth. We might want to pull back a little bit on that. So fan feedback obviously is important, and they will take that into consideration for a lot of the smaller stuff. But again, those core concepts of what they're planning, they will stick to their guns and make sure that that stays the same and that they're all on the same page. So a lot of times fans, and I'll even lump myself in there, I'm not opposed to self-critical analysis. Sometimes we think we know best, whether it's story or gameplay or narrative, what have you. But it's so very important for the creatives behind a game or movie or TV show to have a set plan for their project and stick to the core of what that is. That doesn't mean you can't make changes as you go, but that core concept of what's there needs to stay the same. Deviating from that, I think, changes everything. It creates a butterfly effect, which can, be a negative. You look at big movie trilogies like Star Wars, where the directors and writers have even admitted this, that with the newer trilogy, they didn't know where they were going. They just did a new Star Wars and they just kind of flew by the seat of their pants, but there was no set structure for that world, the overarching narrative, and the characters. And you could really see that. So really stick to your guns. Make sure that this story, the characters that you want to display, how you want to do it is there, and that doesn't change based on what fans are saying. But that doesn't mean you don't alienate the fans. Again, one of the biggest things I love about this being a trilogy is that they can incorporate that fan feedback with every new game. And I'm happy that he brought that up, because one of the criticisms I still see the most on my channel and online, to the point where I'm wondering if these are bots saying this, because they all say the same thing. Final Fantasy VII Remake, this trilogy is a soulless cash grab. They're milking the franchise. They don't care. They've ruined FF7. And I'm like, you're missing one of the most positive aspects of this being a trilogy, is the fact that they can take their time now to tell the story they want to tell, to flesh out the characters in the amount of time they want to, and to properly do this original story justice on a much bigger scale. Because looking back at OG FF7, by nowadays, that's a smaller scale game. But back when that came out, it was massive. The scale and scope of that game was insane. So for a lot of people out there who say this should have been one game, are you sure about that? Because if it was one game, and sorry for being a broken record here to people who watch all of my videos, if it was one game, it would probably suck. There'd be so many cuts. It'd be a watered down version of the story and the characters. The scope would probably be smaller, and I guarantee you the people that were complaining about it being a trilogy would be complaining about it being one single game that wasn't what they wanted. So by doing a trilogy, you can pay way more attention to all of the stuff, the story as well as the gameplay, and really freshen it up with each iteration. And that's a super cool advantage to have. You release Remake, there were genuine criticisms of that game's gameplay, which they then refined in part 2. They made characters like Cloud way more fun to play. Aerith is more fun to play. Air combat is a lot better. They also again incorporated more of the open world stuff. Now, one of the criticisms we see a lot of people have of Rebirth is the pacing, the open world aspect. It's too checklisty. Maybe the side quests are popping up too consistently. That is most definitely something that they're gonna refine for part 3. And that is the type of fan feedback that they should listen to. Maybe not all of it, but taking little things like Hamaguchi said in this example in particular of like, okay, maybe we made this minigame a little too hard, or maybe something's a little too obtuse with how you play it. They can make changes in part 3 to ensure that it's just more fun to play. They can really nail down the difficulty, that kind of stuff, or even like my criticism of the lighting. That's something that they can then incorporate into the trilogy in a way that makes sense, that doesn't completely alter the course of what they're doing. So that to me is a really good balance. It's a healthy balance for the developers, but it's also a really, really massive advantage because they can just learn from their mistakes from one game, make sure they don't repeat them for the next. It's great. And our last part of the video, this comes to us from clouddosage.com, where Hamaguchi talks about honoring the game's original story and how it really isn't going to be that different. John Scar of Cloud Dosage goes on to write, when revisiting Final Fantasy VII, Hamaguchi said the team's goal wasn't to change everything. Instead, they wanted to respect the original while reworking the parts that couldn't be fully expressed with the tech of 97. He described the remake series as a chance to rebuild, not rewrite, what Final Fantasy VII meant to fans. The goal was never to discard the original's emotional core or narrative beats. Instead, the team focused on enhancing moments that were limited by older hardware. Hamaguchi made it clear that this version of 7 Remake isn't just about technical improvements, it's also about preserving the impact of the story. He wants longtime fans to feel the same excitement and surprise they did in 97, and hopes new players can experience that feeling for the first time. Rebuild, not rewrite. Perhaps Hamaguchi missed his calling as a rapper because he was dropping some bars with that line. But again, I'm really, really happy he said that. That's kind of stuff they've been saying for a while now, is that they don't have plans to drastically change and alter the game's story. Obviously, they're going to make some changes here and there. Like I've said, get from point A to point B, but how we get to those points is going to be a little bit different, but the overarching narrative will still remain the same. And using the rebuild, not rewrite example, I think a really great way to explain this would be, let's say you've got a Lego set. It's OG FF7. You build it, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, But then they introduce a compilation of Final Fantasy VII Lego set. So then you take pieces of the compilation set and you try to place them on the OG FF7 set. Some stuff might look really good. Some stuff might stick out like a sore thumb. It just doesn't work. That kind of feels representative of what they did back in the day when they introduced the compilation. They were attempting to retroactively add in new stuff to the story of FF7, whether it's origin stuff, new characters, changing some of the lore. Some of it worked, some of it just felt really out of place. Now, look at the Remake Trilogy. You take the OG FF7 Lego set and the compilation of FF7 Lego set, and you dump all the pieces in one bucket, and then you start building your world from there. So now, everything feels much more natural and organic. You don't have to worry about just sticking something new into something old. It's a chance to rebuild, which is super cool. And that's how they've been doing it, man. They've somehow found ways to take the compilation, whether it's Dirge stuff, Advent Children, even like some Before Crisis, and implement it into this world where it now feels natural and organic. And I'm pretty sure they're going to expand upon that even more in Part 3. We're probably going to see the return again of Deep Ground and Nero and Weiss and all that crazy stuff. But I'm also happy that he said this because there are a lot of people who were not happy with Rebirth's ending, which I get. It's a very jarring, confusing ending. Once I thought about it more, I really liked it. But I do see a lot of comments from people. Two characters in particular get mentioned in these comments. One is Aerith and one is Sephiroth. The first complaint I see a lot is they've ruined Aerith's death. The emotional impact of Aerith dying is now gone. The trilogy sucks. What are they doing? That's kind of the whole point. The fact that there's a lot of people that, for whatever reason, can't see the forest for the trees when it comes to Aerith's death and how it was displayed is kind of shocking, because it seems pretty evident that in Part 3, that entire scenario will play out in full. We're going to see Sephiroth fall from the heavens, murder her, and Cloud's going to give that beautiful speech. The music's going to play properly. We're going to see that from beginning to end, including her burial. And the reason it was displayed the way it was in Rebirth is for narrative reasons. Again, we're getting the story through Cloud's perspective. So he's not seeing everything as it's actually happening. So for him, that moment is going to be very jarring, very confusing. He's going to black out some things, which we do see in the credits for Rebirth. There's a section of the end of the game that is just completely blacked out. So her death isn't ruined. The emotional impact isn't gone. It's just been repurposed for Part 3, which I can see it already, man. The moment that part happens, I'm going to be bawling my eyes out, hearing the music, hearing her theme, hearing the lines from Cody. He's going to nail it. It's all building to something. And I think maybe sometimes as fans, we can just be a little impatient and they want a certain thing when they want it, but they don't realize that because it's a trilogy, they're going to build up to that. And I think that maybe when Part 3 comes out, people will go back and look at Rebirth's story, specifically the ending, and be like, oh, I get it now. So maybe it'll be, kind of like that. The other criticism is Sephiroth. In the OG FF7, obviously Sephiroth was incredibly mysterious. We didn't know much about this guy. He was super elusive, which worked for FF7 because we didn't know anything about him. Looking at the Remake Trilogy, even people who haven't played FF7 know a ton about Sephiroth. He's that popular of a character. So you can't just repeat the same mysterious villain shtick that he had in FF7. You have to take that mystery and twist it a little bit. So now the mystery is, hang on, Sephiroth is showing up way earlier than he's supposed to. He seems to know more than he's supposed to, and his goals seem completely different. So that is now the new mystery with Sephiroth. It's not, oh, who's this guy? It's now, what is he planning? How does he know what he knows? That is the new mystery, is we don't know what his end game is. So I still feel like they're taking a lot of those themes and how they treated the characters in the original game. They're just kind of repurposing them slightly because most of us already know that narrative. So you got to find a way to keep it fresh and new and exciting, which also plays into the end. I think we'll have that actual ending of the game. And this was tweeted out by Subtext on Twitter, where he says, yeah, the original ending of FF7, that's what we're going to get. That's what we're working towards, except it's just not going to be ambiguous anymore. And that's what the developers have been saying, is that they want the ending to just be more moving and actually be a complete ending that will have a proper send-off. So all the original stuff is still there. It's just getting slightly repurposed or tweaked, but the whole theme and story is still going to be the same. There's just going to be some changes here and there. And again, because they're rebuilding, not rewriting, they can change those things properly and have it feel organic, and take something like Cloud's recovery from Advent Children and now incorporate that into the main story of the Remake trilogy. So I really like that whole rebuild, not rewrite, because when you rebuild something, obviously it's gonna look a little different, but it's still going to be very familiar too. So I think that's a really good analogy to describe this Remake trilogy. And again, Hamaguchi, if this whole gaming thing doesn't work out, I think you got a career as a rapper. But man, I know we're still a ways away for full-on proper marketing for Remake Part 3, trailers, release dates, all that good stuff. But the amount of hype and the level of excitement and anticipation I'm starting to feel is feeling a lot like the hype I felt leading up to 7 Remake, which is not to say I wasn't excited for Rebirth. I was super excited for Rebirth. I couldn't wait to get my hands on that game. But the hype building up to Remake, our first experience with this trilogy, hit different. And with Part 3 being the culmination of everything, a full-on proper finale, that's just gonna hit different too. So I expect these feelings to go into overdrive once we actually get a teaser and proper marketing. But man, this game is shaping up to be really special just based on what we've heard and a lot of the feedback from the developers. I think we're in really good hands, and I think Part 3, again, is going to be the best of the trilogy. So with that being said, that is the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about what we covered in today's video. Specifically, what kind of gameplay changes are you hoping to see in Remake Part 3? I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.